So I'm Jonathan McAuley, Senior Export Advisor at the Canadian Commercial Corporation, also known as CCC. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that CCC is located on the traditional and unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose presence here reaches back to immemorial times. Today, I'll be presenting who CCC is, our programs and services, some examples of success stories, where businesses can find opportunities, and I'll explain how you can get started with CCC. For those of you who aren't familiar with CCC, that's completely fine. We are one of the smallest crown corporations within the government of Canada, and most people who are familiar with us are because they've worked with us in the past. CCC is again, a crown corporation within the international trade portfolio, and we are Canada's government-to-government contracting agency. We are the only Government of Canada agency that offers international contracting expertise to help Canadian exporters of all sizes sell to federal, state, or municipal governments around the world. So we take on contracts to deliver goods and services on behalf of Canadian businesses across multiple sectors, mainly in aerospace, defense, infrastructure, clean technology, renewable energy, and ICT. I'll add that we can also take on contracts in other sectors. The important part is that governments are the buyers. Last year, CCC signed and executed contracts in 62 countries, and we supported this through with approximately 600 businesses, and 80% of these were SMEs. And I'll expand on these programs on the next slides, but we have a few different programs available to Canadian businesses and services. The U.S. Department of Defense prime contractor, where we help the U.S. Department of Defense procure from Canadian businesses through CCC. International prime contractor, where CCC signs commercial contracts with governments around the world for the purchase of goods and services that are available from Canada, and sourcing, where CCC provides procurement expertise to the federal government to quickly deploy international aid or assistance programs. We also have two services that we offer Canadian businesses. So Global Bid Opportunity Finder, or GBOF, which is a platform that compiles opportunities from over 40 sources and 200 jurisdictions around the world. And we offer advisory services to all businesses to guide them on challenges they're facing and through opportunities, and provide guidance on CCC's programs, and to refer them to other services across the Government of Canada when we feel they can benefit from help from our partners. So the US DoD Prime Contractor Program. Before going into the program itself, I want to mention that the US DoD is seized with climate adaptation. Since 2021, the US DoD released over 15 different climate-related strategies and plans, including the 2024 National Defense Industrial Strategy. Its aim is to ensure that supply chains have security within the DoD, and to include the impacts of and the effects of climate change into consideration. It lays out a flexible framework for actions to achieve resilient supply chains. And so if you are targeting the US DoD and you can benefit from CCC's help in doing so, it's good to remember that they place importance on climate resilience, and it's to keep some language to that effect within your profiles when you register for sales to the US. Now, since 1956, Canada has benefited from being part of a common North American industrial base. To facilitate Canada's supply of goods and services to the US DoD, CCC is assigned a role as the Canadian custodian of an agreement called the Canada-US Defense Production Sharing Agreement. To deliver on this mandate, CCC is embedded in the US, and bear with me, these are called DFARS, so Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplements. We're embedded as prime contractor for the US DoD contracts greater than $250,000 US. This program is provided at no cost to Canadian businesses and no cost to the US buyer. So we do this as a way to promote a common North American defense industrial base, and to to help Canadian businesses to secure more business in the US. So it's open for businesses of all sizes with capabilities of interest that would be considered by what's essentially the world's largest buyer. So whether it's your first time or if you're a well-practiced exporter, CCC can guide you from the initial registration steps. We can advise you as you navigate the solicitation process, and we can help troubleshoot regulatory issues that come up along the way. And just as an additional reference, I'll be sharing some of these references in an email after the webinar in the coming week. Another important program that CCC delivers on, and again, this is through our government-to-government contracting approach, is International Prime Contractor. It's a unique program that's designed to fulfill specific and complex government contracting requirements around the world. And this program is typically outside of the US to the rest of the world. What we do is we elevate what would be a B2G commercial deal to a government-to-government contract that essentially levels the power imbalance between parties. G2G is often used in urgent and compelling cases, as it can open up some procurement channels outside of the normal competitive processes. Our program is designed to be nimble. Every contract is uniquely tailored based on the circumstances. This allows us, for example, in infrastructure, to take the right amount of time from proposal, negotiation, to detailed considerations in order to fulfill buyer needs, including around climate resilience. On the other hand, G2G can be used for service contracts and can take on rapid contracting cases for disaster response, for example. And I've got a good example I'll show you in the coming slides. CCC, as prime contractor, provides oversight until the end of the agreed terms and conditions. We include a guarantee of contract performance backed by the Government of Canada that provides buyers the confidence that doing business with Canada means on time, on budget, and to spec. So how does G2G contracting work? So first, we perform a due diligence on the Canadian business that has products and services specifically to sell to a foreign government entity. The due diligence allows CCC to qualify a Canadian business as a CCC customer and for us to understand whether the business and the capability is a fit for G2G contracting. A second step to this due diligence is on the actual opportunity. With both of these steps completed, it forms the basis of a risk mitigation framework. And we apply this framework throughout the lifetime of the contract in order to mitigate the risks that might arise. So after CCC enters a service level agreement with our new customer, the Canadian business, we submit a proposal and negotiate an agreement with the foreign government buyer. And after successful negotiations, CCC signs a prime contract with the foreign government buyer, and we enter a simultaneous domestic contract with the Canadian business to supply the goods and services. One note is that for international prime contractor, CCC charges a cost recovery fee that is typically built in within the prime contract for the buyer to pay. CCC provides, I mentioned, a guarantee of contract performance, or we might call this a sovereign guarantee that is applied within the prime contract. The Canadian business supplies the products and services directly to the buyer, but CCC manages the contract performance and administration of payments with the foreign government buyer. Our oversight and financial administration reduces the contracting risks and provides additional levers to resolve unforeseen issues. So how does this look like in real life? So we'll share a couple examples. So in 2017, CCC and AECON signed a government-to-government contract to redevelop the L.F. Wade International Airport in Bermuda. It was completed on time and on budget and opened in 2020. This award-winning project is an example of climate adaptation and resilience from multiple angles. It uses LED lighting inside the terminal and on the airfield. The terminal is designed specifically to minimize lighting and cooling by allowing natural light to enter the terminal, while minimizing radiant and conductive heat transfers, reducing the amount of lighting and air conditioning required. A building automation system automatically adjusts the airflows and intake of outdoor air in response to the actual occupancy in any given zone, significantly reducing energy consumption and cooling. There's a new wastewater treatment system that enhances gray water recycling. The treated water is recycled back in the terminal and used in separate non-potable water systems that serves in terminal washrooms. And to address the risk of sea level rise over time, or the risk to be of floods through ocean storm surges during the hurricane season, the airport was relocated inland about 9 feet higher than the old terminal, and the construction of the terminal used materials to ensure that it can withstand wind speeds of 277 kilometers an hour, equivalent to a Category 5 hurricane. So good example of climate resiliency. Another example of projects is earlier this year, CCC signed a project with the company Hatch, earlier with the Peruvian government as part of the third stage of the Chavimochic infrastructure project. So once completed, this project is going to be the largest drip irrigation project in the world, enabling Peru to cultivate new land and improve existing farmland. The project is going to supply reliable and potable water to 40,000 families and create over 150,000 new local jobs. This project is expected to boost the agricultural and agribusiness sectors in northern Peru, enabling the region to triple its exports from 400 million to 1.2 billion. And in late 2023, CCC and Atkins Realis signed a G2G contract in Romania in support of extending the life of a CANDU reactor at the Cernavodă nuclear power plant. Cernavodă's long-term operation is central to Romania's plan to reach its goal of energy stability and decarbonization, as well as phasing out nearly 4 gigawatt hours of coal-fired power by 2032. And now I have a few examples of disaster response, and this one in particular with Colson. So in September 2019, when major forest fires were threatening the Amazonian rainforest in Bolivia, their government called on Canada for an urgent solution. Now, Colson, having never worked in Bolivia or with the Bolivian government, they reached out to CCC in order to ensure that they can actually deliver on this contract while being able to return its assets back to Canada safely. And so CCC and Colson, with the urgency of the fire, we turned around a contract in just 1 week. Yes, that's a Government of Canada entity turning around a full contract in 1 week. Sounds a bit fictitious, but it really happened. The Bolivian government was provided with aerial firefighting services. Colson provided a crew of 18 members, along with 3 helicopters, 2 Sikorsky's, and a custom Chinook. Last year, CCC and Colson partnered up again with another G2G contract, this time to provide Argentina with aerial firefighting services. So we facilitated this contract through an MOU that we first signed with the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development. And one key thing to note for all the businesses out there is when we are looking to put together a G2G contract with a country that we haven't done business yet, oftentimes we'll look to open up that market through using non-binding MOUs that are specific to the work that CCC does. And most of you should be familiar with our famous former Canadair, now de Havilland CL 415s or DHC 515s. CCC for a number of years now has been partnering with de Havilland to work and prepare a list of potential buyers that could procure this technology as they ramp up production. And so we first started in Morocco, where we signed a G2G contract to provide 3 CL 415s. And you're currently hearing in the news about these aircrafts are actually out there helping out in Portugal for some of their fires that they're facing. And then over the last couple of years, and still currently, CCC and de Havilland has been working in partnership with the EU's civil protection mechanism called rescEU in order for CCC to be prime contractor to its member states. And we've concluded some contracts to provide 22 DHC 515s to Greece, Croatia, Portugal, France, and Spain. And we're currently finalizing a contract with Italy. So a very promising future for this aircraft. Where to find opportunities? Now, first, looking to our Government of Canada partners. I know some of them are possibly on this webinar as well. I want to mention that CCC works very closely with our Government of Canada partners. We are Team Canada, but some differences in what we do. And I'll mainly talk about the Trade Commissioner Service and Export Development Canada. So both of these entities have offices and representation around the globe. The TCS being actual Canada's official representation on a commercial angle at our embassies and high commissions abroad. Both can provide market intelligence and advice and make introductions to contacts. And the TCS will most often lead on Canada's trade shows, which businesses are invited to participate, including on trade missions abroad. Now, for export-ready businesses, the TCS can help to find some opportunities and resolve problems during contract delivery once you actually sign on to deliver. CCC works with the TCS on every project as part of our pursuit teams. They are essentially our eyes and ears on the ground. CCC being mainly based in Ottawa, though a lot of our business development team will be traveling the world either to attend trade shows, trade missions, or to advance projects with our Canadian business customers. EDC provides capital, financing, insurance products that can be very useful to businesses on specific projects. At times, CCC will work with EDC when projects can benefit from their financing or their insurance products, but we're not necessarily limited to working with them. So CCC has flexibility to work with any financial institution, including multilaterals or foreign credit agencies as well. And this comes in handy because when we're doing a project in another country, sometimes that country has a private source of financing that's not necessarily from their sovereign government that they want to use within a project. CCC putting a guarantee of contract performance on a project can help to attract financing as well. Now, if you're an SME, you should consider looking at, and I say should, you really, really should consider looking at CanExport. Through this program, businesses can qualify to receive funding to help open up a brand new export market. One quick important note is in the US, that's divided into multiple different markets, and there might be other places in the world as well. So that can be a good tool for you to have the resources necessary to expand your business in new places. Global Bid Opportunity Finder. So during the pandemic, GBOF, as we call it, was one of CCC's special projects. This was one of our goals in order to provide a new resource to match businesses to opportunities. And so, provided at no cost, GBOF is designed as a web platform that you can use to search using your own keywords and then save these searches to have them emailed to the recurrence of your choice. And it will even translate the solicitation subject to English or French and help you quickly find opportunities that you can pursue regardless of language that it's originally in. One pro tip, some businesses will actually provide a service as a consultancy, actually charging to do what GBOF does. GBOF is free. All you have to do is sign up, and you can do so by going to gbof.ca. So bookmark that. Connecting businesses through G2G. So where does CCC find our own opportunities? That's a question we often receive. The majority of our leads are actually brought to us from recurring customers and new businesses, and the rest through trade partners and sometimes governments. In pretty much all the circumstances, the buyer is a government entity, and the market has some level of complexity. But when Canadian businesses approach us with an opportunity, number one, I have to mention is that everything CCC does, we keep commercial confidential. All the information that is shared from a specific business, we keep with that business in order to protect their own opportunity. Now, for those businesses that bring opportunities, having CCC as a partner and the Government of Canada as the prime contractor on the project can be that added benefit needed for the buyer to push them over the line to say yes, because they see the risk mitigation and the bilateral relationship as an advantage. When we get approached from foreign government buyers, who have already, they either have already worked with CCC or they've seen some of our projects or the results of our projects, and they're interested in what we have to offer. If they don't already have a specific business or capability in mind, CCC will look at its roster of qualified customers. So what do we mean by qualified customers? That's businesses that have already submitted a due diligence, and that due diligence lasts 3 years. We look to use this qualified customer list to build a list of capabilities that are available from Canada that CCC can be ready to back through our government-to-government contracting mechanism. And so there is a benefit to qualifying, and if you're interested in doing so, myself and my colleagues, we can always help you with that. Now, if those government buyers that approach us don't have a business in mind, and we don't have that specific business that could fulfill the need on our roster, we'll work with our partners to try to find a potential business that could do the work. So mostly we'll work with the Trade Commissioner Service and ETC to help find that proper customer. One note is that CCC is a small Crown corporation. And for this reason, it's important to note that we don't take on every project. Before committing, we take on a robust due diligence to ensure that the Canadian business can deliver on the terms and conditions of the contracting consideration. We also validate the project and look at who the buyer is and whether there might be some adverse consequences to the environment, to human rights, or in terms of labor practices. How to get started. Now, CCC is typically looking for businesses that have products and services that governments buy, that have the financial capacity to actually pursue large deals. And I'll talk about the size of deals afterwards. More than 2 years of experience selling this specific project or product or service to a government entity, whether that's in Canada or abroad. And we're looking for businesses that have a track record or have plans to sell internationally. So we want to help businesses that are being strategic and are actually doing their work in terms of targeting a market abroad, a government entity in particular. And that's where CCC will advise on whether we're beneficial to them in that market, if that government is able to do government to government, or how do we get there? In terms of opportunity, we're looking for typically larger than $10 million deals, though we can typically go as low as 1 million. If it's a 1 million to 10 million deal, we're looking for a project that can either open up a brand new market or lead to larger or multiple projects later down the line. Now, the reason for this size, and this is for international prime contractor, I should say, the reason for this size is because CCC's cost recovery fee, which starts around 1 million, for projects over 1 million, will typically not be worth it for projects below the $1 million mark, because our contract management services cost us at CCC a specific amount. We just need to make sure that we cover our own basis in terms of our own expenditures. Now, for the U.S. Department of Defense, the threshold is lower, so $250,000 US for opportunities, specifically because that's enshrined within the agreement that we have, and there is no fee for the business nor the buyer. Now, I recommend that you visit our website, ccc.ca. Our marketing team has spent a lot of time to revamp this website. It looks great. There's a lot of different ebooks and guides. We have a newsletter you can sign up for to receive information, including about trade shows that we participate in. You can read profiles of Canadian businesses that have succeeded with government-to-government contracts. You can get more information on our services. And there's a link, the Contact Us link, that leads to a form that also helps you to think about what kind of information that we need to look at in order to know how to guide you better. And so do fill out that contact form. It goes to our client contact center, which is myself, Claude Gendron, and Matt Larivière. And we have a couple others, Chris Ike, who newly joined our team, and Tito Almeida. And so our small but mighty team receives inquiries from Canadian businesses. We help with the onboarding process, including that due diligence questionnaire. We respond to questions, and there's no wrong questions, and we can provide guidance on all our programs. We are the ones, so Matt, myself, and Claude are the ones that typically attend trade shows in Canada and sometimes in the US. And we are there to meet with businesses. We're there to talk about our programs and answer your questions. Speaking of questions, I believe we're going to open it up to questions from the floor. There is a chat. It might be easiest to write your questions in the chat. So I'll stop sharing my screen and see what questions we have now. Okay, so we have a first question that is from Roman, who they proposed their help and assistance to European countries currently affected by huge flooding in way of emergency evacuation of people and their belongings to the safe places. What are urgent steps that I can recommend? Okay, thanks, Roman, and thanks for sharing your website. Now, number one, urgent, in cases of urgencies around the world, Canada's embassies and our representation abroad, they're closely monitoring what's going on the ground. And especially if you are a Canadian business and you're involved in helping out in these matters, I do recommend touching base with our representation abroad if you're specifically helping a specific region, and they would be the ones best to give you some advice on what you could do to help. Now, from CCC's perspective, we so on our sourcing program, where we help deliver aid to the rest of the world, we do this on behalf of Global Affairs Canada and the Department of National Defence. And when we do so, we do it at their direction. If they are looking for a specific capability and we don't have a business or they don't specify a business that they're looking for, we might be able to suggest to Global Affairs or the buyers some businesses that we've already qualified through our due diligence process. So, if this is something that you work in and you're a Canadian business, do contact us to get your due diligence done. Okay, and from the chat, does CCC assist contracting to First Nations communities in Canada or internationally, and that may be faced with climate risk or have renewable energy needs? Thanks for this question. So to answer specifically, CCC's mandate is with regards to helping Canadian businesses export to countries around the world. So we don't have a domestic mandate per se. That said, First Nations or Indigenous-led businesses are more than welcome to work with us, especially when they have projects that they're looking to do abroad, be they with regards to climate resilience or other. We do have a couple of Indigenous businesses that we are talking to, like ProMetal, for example, and we've been engaging with the Canadian Council of Indigenous Business and CCAB as well, trying to get the word out that CCC is a resource that you should consider and talk to us. Does CCC include First Nations knowledge for forest fires and irrigation with regards to the Peru project? Great question. Now, CCC, we are, as a prime contractor, we're the macro manager of the contracts. We work with each project on an individual basis with our lead Canadian business. That business has to put some sort of social perspective within the project in collaboration with the government buyer. And so short answer is we have a responsible business conduct that we encourage businesses to read, and we ask businesses to have a plan to apply on their projects as well. And so in this case, it would be the local First Nations involvement in Peru, and it would be led through the business with some guidance from CCC. But typically, we put this in the hands of our businesses. And I'll actually share the link to our responsible business conduct in the email that we'll be sending out. Okay, I'm just going to flip back to the Q&A section. Okay, so we have a question about the wildland urban interface firefighting in Alberta. Would your agency be able to help navigate U.S. Forest Service And so the quick answer is CCC's program in the US is specifically with the US Department of Defense, but sometimes other agencies are able to use that same agreement in order to deliver projects of national importance or project of national security. Homeland Services, for example, will use it. The Coast Guard at times has used it. So whether the Forest Service can use it is a question. I don't think they've used it in the past. It's one of those case by case scenarios where you'd have to ask them whether the project you're looking to do fits within their understanding of what national security is. Vertical farming opportunity, specifically when a government will secure the offtake of what is produced to ensure that type of produce is no longer imported. Now, CCC, we're currently looking into expanding our services to include agriculture and agri products. We have some like agriculture related projects like the Hatch drip irrigation project, or we export potash to Bangladesh, for example, sort of adjacent to the sector. We haven't done specific farming projects because we haven't had a circumstance where either a Canadian business has approached us with a project where the government is a buyer internationally looking to do a farming opportunity. So there might be some potential for that in the future, but it hasn't risen off. Now, with regards to whether it changes Canada's imports or exports from that country, we don't really look at that as a dimension to our projects. Our main goal, number one, is to facilitate trade. Like it's a policy instrument with a commercial taste to it. Okay, next question. So whether the due diligence process I mentioned, whether businesses starts once they've expressed interest in a particular RFP, or if it can be done proactively. So yes, the due diligence can be done proactively for both programs, US DoD and the rest of the world. We've given it a lifetime of, I believe, 3 years, so that on the corporate side of things, we can qualify a business as a potential customer to help speed things up, so that once a project comes on board, you can actually take it on much faster. Now, with regards to RFPs, I want to mention something too. For the US DoD, it is a lot by solicitations and RFPs, but for the rest of the world, it's case by case. So CCC's expertise is in sole sourcing, and we will sometimes set the stage to do projects through sole sourcing. There are also different ways of procurement. Sometimes there are competitive G2G contracting processes. So these businesses don't hear about. It's specifically through diplomatic channels. Countries will contact CCC and say that they're looking to, for example, do an infrastructure project, and they want Canada to present its best solution, and they're going to compare it to other countries who also do G2G. So the UK, for example, Germany, France, South Africa, South Korea, Japan, and Australia, in the US as well. And so there are many different channels that governments use to procure, and RFPs and solicitations are just some of them. Okay, so I see there's a question about a business that is a registered entity in the US, and whether you're better responding directly to US government opportunities through sam.gov, and can CCC still add value advantage? This is a really good question, and I've got an answer for you. Now, a lot of Canadian businesses will say to us, should we get a subsidiary in the US? Should we set up in the US in order to sell or have a better way to sell to the government in the US? Here's the thing. Businesses in Canada, specifically looking to sell to the US DoD under the agreement, the DPSA agreement, are considered domestic supply to the US DoD. If you set up in the US, unless the owner of your subsidiary is a US citizen and owns over 51% of your business, that business will be considered a foreign-owned entity. Now, if you're a foreign-owned entity, you're going to be listed on a foreign entity list within the US, and there'll be some limitations as to what you can actually apply to or bid on from the US. So you're actually disadvantaged unless you have a more than majority ownership within the US. On the flip side, if you're a Canadian business, the DPSA agreement actually allows you to be considered domestic. You actually have a better vantage point from Canada to bid on these contracts. Now, US being enormous and this agreement being, old since 1956, there are some times where contracting officers aren't familiar with all of the nitty gritty of the regulations. And we at CCC, we're constantly there to help businesses to either adjust language in solicitations because it specifically says we exclude businesses not located in the US, for example. And we do that by, through our contacts all the way up in the Pentagon, working directly with them to remind them that there's this agreement in place and there are regulations that state that Canadian businesses are domestic supply. And likewise, this is reciprocal. So D&D from Canada can actually purchase through this agreement from the US. And so it is a two-way street, and it does benefit both countries. Can I expand on the cost recovery fee? You're guessing it's a percentage based on, yes, I can expand on that. So for international prime contractor, our cost recovery fee that starts at the $1 million mark. Below 1 million, it's a standard $50,000 fee. Flat fee, any project under $1 million. They rarely happen unless, for example, it's a patented capability that only one business does, and that government will only buy through government to government, and they're willing to pay a premium on that project. And so it has happened, but it really rarely happens. Above $1 million, our fee starts at 5%. And it reduces based on the size of the project in terms of cost, of value, in terms of the complexity of the project, in terms of the risks that are assessed, the longevity of the project, and whether there could be recurring projects in the future. So that fee, there's a range that we do. It does go down, and typically, one advantage to note is that because of the guarantee of contract performance that we place on our contracts, a lot of governments will waive or at the minimum reduce bonding fees that they put on projects, which will typically come out either about the same or better off with the CCC cost recovery fee. Of course, that cost recovery fee is built into the prime contract for the buyer to pay. So what we do is when we are targeting a project with a business, when we're developing a proposal, we have the business calculate that fee out within the proposal that will then jointly bring to the buyer. I'm gonna look for a couple other questions. How long is the onboarding process and the due diligence? So good question. So the onboarding process, it's not very long. It's different, obviously, for the US DoD than it is for international prime contractor. For the US DoD, the reason it's different is because if you haven't done it already, you also have to register with sam.gov and get what's called an NCAGE number. And so there's a couple external steps that take, about 2 weeks to do. For CCC, our due diligence, the speed of it depends on whether there's an active project that we're pursuing or looking to pursue, or if you're just looking to process the corporate due diligence to be a qualified customer. If it's just that, just to be considered a qualified customer, it's tops a week. If it's for a specific project, if that project is urgent, we can turn around the due diligence in even a day. We're fairly quick. We're a small entity, 130 people. Everybody knows everybody at this work, and we all get along. So we're fairly quick at turning things around. Okay, we are an advisory service, and we're currently providing services to a foreign university about improving their ESG posture and advise for their greenhouse gas reduction strategy. How can CCC help support this scenario? Okay, so we'd have to go back a little bit in terms of looking at, first, CCC does projects with foreign governments. So if this university is for some reason in another country owned by a government entity. And if this project is above that threshold I mentioned, so minimum 1 million, but ideally above 10 million, then we would look at it together as a potential G2G project. But given what it is, I don't think it would actually meet the thresholds. I think it would actually be below those ranges. And I'm a little bit doubtful as to the university being a government entity. Okay, I'm just going to flip over to the chat to see if there's questions there. Do I see much success in digital offerings? Deep security and access to public places, for example. And okay, I'll start with that. So ICT is one of our sectors, and we do deliver various projects in ICT. Some, for example, so they're all very different, but one of our earlier projects is with regards to digital lotteries in El Salvador and in Honduras with a company called Canadian Banknote. These are long-term projects. We've started them at least 10 years ago, maybe more, and they are on a 10-year renewable term. We've done other projects, for example, with GDOTS in Panama, a digital upgrade to their emergency communication systems. And so, the reality is it's all case by case. Every project is different, and CCC is adaptable across sectors. One of the benefits is that because we work in multiple sectors, we don't have a siloed approach. We actually have lessons learned as contract experts that we apply in order to benefit contracts that would be in different sectors. And so obviously some places are more different, more complicated than others. The US, for example, will require higher level certifications and qualifications in order to do ICT related projects. A lot of priority for emergency products and services like firefighting, but what is a priority to provide more proactive services like monitoring and ensuring fires never impact outside of natural purpose? So again, mitigation and planning and prevention measures, those types of projects are priorities for foreign governments. Of course they are. There are conversations led by multilaterals that are encouraging countries around the world to create national plans to address these things. And I have to admit ahead of time that I'm not an expert in this domain, but I will say that for CCC, we take on projects as they are brought to us based on their probability of success. We don't often get projects brought to us that are early on in the prevention side of things. If you're a business that does this, and if you are targeting a foreign country, then absolutely, if you have an opportunity in this domain, do bring it to our door and we'll look at it. Now, I would suspect in non-urgent situations, in a lot of countries around the world, they'll often look to deliver on these projects themselves within their domestic capabilities. But Canada has a lot to offer, and I believe that this sector in particular is one that's growing very fast and has there's a lot of expertise and knowledge and innovation that Canada brings that could really be beneficial. So you have a request to build and set up 2 medical centers with the foreign government, and you're wondering how CCC can help us. Okay, so if a Canadian business has an opportunity to build 2 medical centers, now I'd want to look into this even more. I'd want to find out, are you talking about an actual hospital or buildings, or like an infrastructure project, or are you talking about a temporary medical camp, maybe for like a military institution, for example? Now, we've built hospitals before. This is something that we can do. We've done both, actually. We've done tent hospitals with sprunk shelters, I believe, or Weather Haven, and we have the possibility of doing this type of work. So send us a message through our contact us. Is there support from CCC for a Canadian company to develop disaster response solutions specifically to the hurricane belt? Product is focused on G2G and B2B. Depending on the size of the country and their exposure to hurricanes, the project could be less than 1 million and larger than 10 million. Or that's 2 different area. So CCC, if you have a project that is of interest, that has a government buyer, a specific government entity that is looking to buy this solution, and if the value is above 1 million or larger than 10 million, please send us a note through or contact us. We'll have a look. But it has to be real. It has to be a real project. We would look into validating that project to find out if it's a priority with the buyer, and if they have a budget identified, and what exactly is what does the project actually look like? So yeah, send us a note, and I'll just have a look at the Q&A one more time. What services do we provide in the Caribbean? So going back to our international prime contractor program, that's the program that we use to deliver projects in the Caribbean. When Canadian businesses approach us, we will look at the Caribbean. They are close to us, and we have great relationships in the Caribbean. We, for example, built infrastructure projects there, and I've delivered expanded piers in St. Kitts and Nevis, for example, and I mentioned just through our sourcing program, aid with Global Affairs Canada. So we're closing up on time here. We'll be actually responding to questions that are in the chat within our response in the email that we'll send to all participants. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to be with us today. It was a lot of fun, and I'm always happy to share this information. We do onboarding meetings with businesses when they contact us and they have a potential project or they're a fit for CCC. We're more than happy to answer questions more specific to where they situate themselves in their sector, and happy to help you along the way. So on behalf of CCC, again, thank you for joining us today.